wild violets that grow throughout the United States, not just in Appalachia, are edible. I've been out picking some this morning because I'm going to make jelly out of them. Seems like gardeners have a love-hate relationship with them. There's a lot of gardeners that just despise them because they do spread easily and they'll infiltrate all your beds. But I can't, it's hard for me to get mad at their little cheery faces, so I kind of just let them go where they will. Both the stem and the bloom part of the violet is edible. Maybe you've seen the candied violets. People sometimes candy them and then put them on cakes. They're really beautiful. But people also make violet syrup, violet tea, violet jelly, and even violet vinegar. So a lot of people really utilize the violet, the lowly little violet. Of course, you would need to make sure that wherever you gather them that they've not been sprayed. You know, you wouldn't want to eat any that had been sprayed with chemicals or pesticides or something like that. I don't have to worry about that in my yard, but I do have to worry about maybe the neighborhood dogs. So I always give them a good rinse before I use them. So violets can also be used medicinally. Of course, I'm not a doctor, so I would advise you to do your own research or check with your doctor before you use any of these remedies that I found. But one time when I was researching for the blind pig and the acorn, this was the research that I found, some of the different varieties of ways that violets could be used medicinally. So violet leaves were used to make a poultice to relieve headaches. I should really try that one. Violets were soaked in water. The water was used to relieve dysentery, colds, coughs, and used as a spring tonic. Violet roots were crushed and used as a poultice to aid in skin ailments. And perhaps the most interesting to me, violet roots were soaked in water, then the water was used to soak corn seeds prior to planting. This was said to repel insects from the corn, and I found that information on the American Violet Society website. Really interesting stuff. I'd be interested to know if you've used violets medicinally. I hope that you'll share that with us. So as a child growing up in Appalachia, I was taught an interesting game to do with violets. If you look at the violet, if you had a really good imagination, you might think that looks like a rooster's face. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, the game was, it's called Fighting Roosters, but it's actually with violets. So I remember exactly where I was standing. It's funny how your memories will be like that. I can remember where I was standing between Pap's and my uncle's house. There was this little bank. It's no longer there because roads and progress and more houses and all that kind of stuff. But someone taught me to play this little game, and I think it was one of my uncles, but I can't really remember that. But I remember that's where I learned how to fight rooster violets in Appalachia. So Matt's going to help me. We're going to demonstrate for you. So you each take your violet, and then you wrap them around each other, and then you pull. Well, so my rooster won. Whoever wins is whoever violet head doesn't pull off is the winner. So we'll do another one, Matt, so we can show them again. Let's see. So you loop them around each other, and then you pull. Uh-oh. Oh, we've got two really good fighters today. I don't think it's going. You still lost. Anyway, that's a fun rooster game or a violet game that I was taught when I was little, when there wasn't nothing else much to do. Us kids would sit in a patch of violets, and we'd do that for hours and just laugh and giggle and have a lot of fun. It'd be interesting to see if any of you have ever heard of the fighting rooster violets when you were little, if you've heard of that game. So now I'm going to rinse off my violet blooms that I got outside. Like I said, you should make sure that, of course, there's no chemicals on them. I'm not afraid of chemicals, but I might be afraid of some dogs. People ask, or one question I think that you'll want to know is, do you take off the stem? Well, I did take off the stem, even though it's edible. But this little green part on the bottom of the bloom, I'm just leaving it. I've read some people think that it might make your jelly bitter. But to be honest with you, I've never tasted any bitterness when I've made it. But if you wanted to, you could certainly pluck off each little petal and only use the petal if that's what you wanted to do. I'm just going to give them a good rinse. Now that I've got them rinsed, I've drained them pretty good, and I'm going to put them in a bowl. And the next step is to pour 2 cups of boiling water over the blooms and allow them to steep overnight. I'll just let them sit on my counter until tomorrow, and then you'll drain out the juice, discarding the blooms, and then we'll make the jelly. So today we're going to make the violet jelly. I've let the blooms soak overnight or steep overnight in the boiling water that we poured them in. Now I've drained them into another bowl and I'll just discard the blooms. I've also added the juice of 1 lemon. If you didn't have a lemon, you could use 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And the rest of the ingredients, I'll put the link down below in the description so you can get to it easier. But basically the violet juice, or the violet, normally you're using fruit juice, you know, this time you're using violet juice kind of. That, we're going to use a box of pectin and 4 cups of sugar, and we're going to make jelly. So now we'll move over to the stove. Okay, we have the violet juice in there and we have it heating. We need to let it come to a boil, but first of all we're going to put our pectin in. So we're going to put a box of pectin and just stir that in. This makes such a small batch of jelly that it doesn't take long. It's really a quick jelly. And I probably should say, even before I start, if you've never made jelly before, it's really easy. Just jump in and do it. There are varying opinions on it though, and my advice to you would be to get a ball book of canning and follow those directions. There's a big debate about whether you should water bath jelly or whether it preserves it, doing the open kettle. The open kettle method of canning means that your product is hot, your jars are hot, and then as they cool, it seals itself. Excuse me. So that's open for debate. Some people feel more comfortable if they go ahead and water bath their jelly. If you wanted to do that, you would water bath it for 10 minutes. As I said, you can get you a ball canning book, and those are the authorities, so that's who you should listen to. I grew up in a home using the open kettle method of jelly making, so I feel totally comfortable doing that, but maybe you don't. So that's just up to you, what you have to decide what works best for you and your family. So now we've got the pectin stirred in. We're just going to wait for it to come to a boil. One of the best things about making jelly to me, of course, other than eating it, of course that's the best part, is when you actually get to eat it. But as you're stirring and as you're watching and waiting for it to come to a boil, waiting for that jelly process to happen, is that wonderful smell that comes up from the pot. These violet flowers just have a sweet floral scent. My favorite is blackberry. There's just no smell like blackberry jelly making. I love it, love it. But every jelly has kind of its own unique scent. And you would think that violet maybe really wouldn't. The first time I made it, I thought, well, it's just going to be sweet. I mean, anything you make with sugar, it's just going to be sweet. But it actually does have its own little distinct flavor. It's like a floral, soft flavor, you know, not nothing as strong as blackberry or as bright as peach or strawberry or something like that, but it does have a distinct flavor. You've probably noticed I have my jars in a pot of boiling, simmering water there in my rings. Some people like to do it, I've heard of people doing it in the dishwasher. My father-in-law, Papa Tony, he heats his jars in the oven, so there's various ways to do that, and you just have to figure out what works best for you and what you like best. I guess I like to do it this way, because that's how I learned, and it's just what I immediately go to. But like I said, if you've got a dishwasher, I don't have one. Some people use that to heat them. Some people, like Papa, uses the oven, and he thinks that's so much easier than fooling with boiling water. And if you've never canned before, you may not know, but you can use the ring part. You can use it over and over and over. So you can see that one's kind of got some scratchy places on the inside, but as long as it still goes on the jar, it'll be fine. And then once your jars are sealed, you can actually take it off if you want to. I have quite a collection, so most of the time I leave mine on, but if I needed them, I could go downstairs and take some off so that I could can something else and use that part. Another thing there's varying opinions about is the actual lid part. When I first learned, was first canning, people would I see people just put the lid, the actual the tap. They would just put it in the boiling water while they were doing that. Then recently, you know, in later years, I've read that you shouldn't do that because it could damage the rubber little part, and maybe your jars wouldn't seal as good. So I typically, just because it's easier for me as I'm doing the process, I just dip one in the simmering water as I need it, and I figure that sterilizes it, and that's good enough. And just with a small amount of time, it's not going to hurt the rubber or little adhesive part that's in there that seals it to the jar. Okay, we're just now beginning to boil. You can see this violet jelly, just like a lot of other jellies, will have this little scum that comes to the top. You can totally scrape that off if it bothers you. A lot of recipes will tell you to do that. It doesn't bother me at all, so I leave it. You can also add a little butter to your mixture, and that's supposed to cut down on the scum. So you can do that, but as I said, it doesn't bother me, so I just leave it as it is and don't even think about it. But if it bothers you, you're sure welcome to do that. Now that it's coming to a boil, coming to a hard boil, we're ready to put it in the jars. So you can turn off the eye and it'll stay hot into the jar. A lot of the canning things that I use are old. This was actually Miss Cindy's, but I like it because it's old. And then my favorite ladle of all was actually my Uncle Woodrow's. And it's just perfect. It has a little spout on it, but it's just the perfect size to do jellies and pickles and stuff. And every time I make jelly or pickles and I use it, I think of Uncle Woodrow. It's a pretty jelly. Everybody that makes jelly or pickles or cans, I should say, not just making jelly, has their own method of doing things. I like to fill one jar up and then I get another one out to set my funnel in. Everybody has a different way of doing it. Granny does hers, and it doesn't seem like it makes any sense to me the way she does things, but it does to her, and that's all that matters. So once you begin to can or to make jelly or put up pickles or any of that kind of stuff, you'll find your own method of doing it. I turn my jelly jars upside down for about 5 minutes. This is a good recipe too to do with kids, of course with supervision, because it doesn't take very long and it doesn't make all that much, so if you're afraid you're not going to like it. Now if you were going to go the route of water bathing your jelly, you wouldn't need to turn them upside down if you're going to go that route, and that's perfectly fine, like I said, if you like to do that. Another route that you could go if you were worried about, you didn't really want to water bath them, but you don't feel safe doing it the way I'm doing it, is since it makes such a small amount, you could just put it in your refrigerator and eat it from there. After my jars have had time to seal, if I find out that one of them has not sealed, like maybe the following day or something, that's what I do. I just put that one in the refrigerator, whether it's jelly or green beans or whatever it is. I put it in the refrigerator and we eat that first. So this, I've got just a little bit left, so I'm not going to worry about putting it in a jar to seal. I'm just going to put it in a jar that we'll just eat right out of that jar, because it's not really enough to fill the jar up. It's just a little bit. It makes a really pretty jelly, pretty color. Almost filled that little jar up. Didn't think it would. So I might go ahead and I'll just go ahead and put a lid on it, even though it's a little tiny one. Might be one that I share with a friend. So now I've got all the jelly out, got it here on the counter, turned it right side up, and I'll just cover them with a cloth, just kind of to keep that heat in and let them sit there. As the day goes by, I'll be able to hear that popping sound, that little pop, and I'll know that they're sealed. But tomorrow, I'll double check, and any one that's not sealed, like I said, I'll just put it in the refrigerator and we'll eat that one first. So I hope you've enjoyed this talk about violets. Hope you'll leave a comment and let me know that if have you ate violet jelly, what did you think about it? Did you ever play the violet rooster game that we showed you? And do you mind violets? Like, I don't mind violets, even though they do have a tendency to take over. I'll totally agree with that. But when I look at their little cheery faces, like I said, it's hard for me to be mad at them. But mostly, I just hope you'll drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia.